Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Spasio webinar on this lovely Friday afternoon here in Norway, depending on where you're connecting from in the world. It could be in the middle of the night, obviously. We have more than 250 people signed up for today's webinar. Generally speaking, roughly 2/3 tend to connect. So we'll see how many will be in the end. As you can tell, we're about 50 people right now. Just to give you a brief idea of the webinar today, what we want to leave you with after this hour is over is obviously an good overview of where Spasio is currently, what it can enable you to do in your early stage building design process. We want to give you some sneak peeks at what's to come, what we're working on, what's in our pipeline. Joining us today, we also have two great guests, clients, friends of ours that are using Spacio actively to create and optimize their project. So they're going to share their experiences with us today, and also a little bit about how they've been collaborating with Team Spacio in order to adapt the platform to their needs. And also, as mentioned in the invitation, we're going to have a special surprise for everyone attending today. So I think we can get into it now. Yeah, so briefly again, where we are today, our guests, what's coming, and a little surprise at the end. We want to introduce this webinar with a little bit of a problem, as you do with any type of presentation. So what we see here at Spasio is that the main issue faced by architects today, particularly in the early stages of their projects, is that there are just a million different requirements, whether that is from the national building codes, whether that is local building codes and regulation, whether that is from your client, whether that is from your manager. No matter what it is, there's a million different requirements that goes into actually designing feasible, viable building projects. And as we all know, very few ideal tools exist for the types of processes or workflows that's required in the early stage. So we end up with kind of this shit show of a workflow in the early stages of building design. Now, naturally, that will have some consequences. We can tell that it can compromise the quality of our designs. We're not necessarily coming up with the best solutions for any given site. We see that it affects the final cost of the project. If anything, being an architect is really very lucrative. I think everyone knows that. So having tools that are not optimized, it increases the time it takes to do something, and time is money, so it increases the cost. And a huge part of this is that if you don't have a good process in the early stages of your projects, it also highly increases the chance of reworks in the later stages, meaning you'll have to go back and again, compromise quality, increase the cost, and you have kind of this negative feedback loop. Those are kind of the hard consequences that affect the project itself and maybe the company, the firm. But there are also consequences for the actual designer, for the architect. And that's something that we also focus on. And it's pretty simple. More work plus less fun equals a weary architect, a sad, weary architect, an architect that has less enjoyment, less fulfillment in their day-to-day job, which again leads to, as we believe, poor performance and the less ability to actually do great, stellar, outstanding work. Luckily, there are solutions to this, we believe, and obviously that's what we're going to explore today. The simple and perhaps obvious solution is to replace some of these frustrating processes. replacing tools, replacing how the tools communicate with each other, and using tools that are more fit for the task at hand. It could help us as architects improve the way we work and improve effectiveness, meaning working on the right things. And naturally, also an important note, it will increase the satisfaction for the actual person sitting down doing the day-to-day job. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't help to have highly profitable projects and have great designs and have this amazing architecture if the people involved aren't satisfied, aren't enjoying themselves, don't feel fulfilled in their job. So everywhere in the world, and also in the world of architecture, we hear a lot about sustainable design. Obviously things should have a low carbon footprint. It shouldn't, negatively impact the surrounding environments or the environment as a whole. Something we want to focus on in Spasio is what we call not just sustainable design, but also sustainable designing, meaning that the job that the architect does should be something that every day when they wake up and they start to work on projects, being creative, coming up with designs, and like the entire process should be something that they look forward to. We believe that's incredibly important. So without further ado, we want to get a closer look at what is actually possible today. And to present that, my dear friend, colleague, and Chief Product Officer of Spacio, André Agi, is going to share that with us now. So André, please take the stage.
Thanks. On to control, so let's hope it all goes well. So let's get some insights into what the actual platform looks like and what we can expect from it. So the platform is shaped to be as a frictionless experience as possible. So as we're looking at here is setting up a new project where you pick your site, and the whole basis of Spasio is that you should be up and running within a couple of minutes. So you get your automatic import of all your contextual data, your terrain, your site, and orthographic photos, and so on. So the platform is currently connecting to OpenStreetMaps and Mapbox. You are, however, able to import your own reference materials in terms of DXF or CAD formats or Rhino files and so on. So, but the whole basis is that you should be up and running and not needing to spend time on getting the proper data, getting the proper foundations for your project. So since this area we're going to explore today is a rather big site, a coastal area, as we mentioned earlier, these new workflows in the AEC is shaped to give a more innovative and more pleasant workflow while designing. So it's a combination of automation and manual design. So as we're seeing here, we launched a tool which allows you to do a generative designing in Spasio, where you select your site, you define some properties, some settings on what type of building typologies do we want, or the type of density, and so on. And very easily you can just click and explore these different, let's call them ID sparks, where the platform gives you some sort of configurations and concept of how it can look. You're able to save and store your favorites, and now we're thinking on the other side and also setting some different parameters. So the whole basis of these is that you're, again, coming up with an idea in your head and exploring it if it's viable or feasible for this site. Should be much less frictionless than what we're used to in this traditional maybe way of working. So here the platform is configured so it's a balance between automation, the whole generative aspect, while you have fully manual control of going in, make fine adjustments and fine-tuning your buildings just like this. So you're not tied and bound to just what the platform gives you. You could, for example, just start and manually design everything from scratch. But it's very convenient to just get some sort of foundation or some base to work from. All these proposals, as we said, you can save them as favorites, you can save them as what we refer to as sketches in Spasio, and explore side by side different concepts and alternatives. And we have here ways of, let's just jump back one tiny tad. we have here different ways of how you visualize, and I think we're looking on the inside here of the building where you actually gets generated all the core placements and the proper like dimensioning of all building elements, and you can have different display modes and see how you affect the terrain, what type of building categories you have, and so on. Really get to the bare bone of how can we utilize and explore this site in the best way possible. So it's not just about generating and coming up with designs, it's also about validating them towards if it's regulations or if it's towards building performance. So we do offer a set of various simulations in the platform. So in parallel to while you're designing and exploring, you launch analysis tools for, in this case, we have a coastal area, and it would be interesting to see how are the actual view qualities, which apartments or which parts of the facade can actually have like good view and a direct contact to the water. So these graphical overviews and data visualizations really gives you a easy overview and see like, okay, what are the qualities? Could we improve it? And so on. Here we're also launching, looking at the daylight potential for the buildings, where you can filter out the graphics to easily identify the critical areas. And these simulations run automatic and update while you're designing, so you can make these fine-tune adjustments and see how you can improve the design while you're working. So there's no longer need to send off your model to an external software in order to run a simulation. So here you work frictionless side by side while designing and also validating and testing the possibilities of your design. Another part of Spasio is actually to offer, it's not just shoeboxes, it's actual properly dimensioned geometry and fairly highly detailed. So we're saying here from 0 to detailed BIM models in minutes. And what we refer to BIM model is that the elements and all the building blocks that you get in Spasio are properly classified, such as internal walls, external walls, the apertures, and so on. So exporting this project to your dedicated BIM software, later on you can continue working frictionlessly in there. And here we, for example, see and test different roof typologies or roof formations. So if you want to go with pitch roofs or flat roofs and so on. And also looking again on the internal side where everything is highly detailed, highly accurate, and all the metrics in the project is also based on this. The graphical aspect is something that we put a lot of emphasis in Spacio also. So we do want it to be the platform that you can feel proud to present your project to your client in. So there's no need for, on the longer term, we hope to not see the architect being in need of any post-processing or so on. So whether it's diagrams, whether it's screenshots or something that you feel, this is actually representing my project in a professional way. So that's why we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on that. Also coming ahead to get these like the whole perspective of scale and graphics and presentability and so on. So I did mention the possibility of working parallel concepts in Spasio. So here we have created 4 different what we refer to as sketches, where you can launch this panel inside and see and compare the metrics. So you can select the current sketch and see, okay, is it underperforming? Do we have any better sketch? Is there any alternative where we get more apartments? Are we hitting the targets that we want in our project and so on? So no longer need to have your file with final version XO final in a folder somewhere. Here you get a big overview of what you're working on in parallel and being able to compare and present the most lucrative alternatives, so to say. So we know, as we also mentioned, our industry is dealing with a lot of different softwares. We will definitely see some examples of that later on also today. So Spasio, the goal is to definitely not be a bottleneck. We do offer a vast variety of imports and also in terms of exports. This is the list that we currently have support for in Spasio. It is expanding. We are covering more and more file formats as it progresses. But in terms of, again, with a level of detail and accuracy, in terms of Rhino and IFC and so on, you can export your projects from here and work frictionlessly again in the later phases of your projects.
Thank you so much, André. I hope it was pretty quick and action-packed, obviously, this overview of Spasio. Next up, we're going to have one of our dear friends, but also Spasio clients, users, aficionados, supporters, what have you, present to us a little bit about how they've been using Spasio and been working with the team. So if I can bring to the stage Mr. Francis Brekke from Oslo Works. Invite him to take control of the presentation.
Thank you. I actually have a guest of my own here, Franz from Spasio.
Hi.
Circular references all around. Yes, my name is Francis. I'm from an Oslo-based company called Oslo Works. We started as 4 partners in 2017, and we're now about 20 architects in Oslo, and we also have a department in Trondheim with 3 architects. I would say we are a young architectural practice in architectural years due to the very long processes and from competition to actually build projects. But we are starting to get there. I mean, we have a quite diverse portfolio where we do planning, master planning, and programming in early phases. We do transformation of historical buildings in urban context. We do new builds as well, office, retail, apartments, very often also in urban context. We have been actually building hotels, and we are also involved in industrial projects, waste management plants, and underground warehouse rehabilitations, to mention a few. The first 5 years, we spent 17,000 hours on competitions. We did 32 competitions. Luckily, we won a lot of them, actually 47%, which we are really proud of. Many of them were invited competitions, not open international competitions, though. But that set the base for the office we are today with over 25 active projects. Some realized, as this very tiny sauna out at Nesodden. Happens to be close to where I live. Not a coincidence, but still, it only took 5 years to realize from competition to the finished projects. But we also do stuff in other scales. This is what we call a multi-dimensional learning center for the ocean. It's supposed to be a hub for ocean innovation, research, and showcasing. At a peninsula close to Oslo. Currently in the planning phase, ready to be submitted to the local authorities for, I would say, further discussion, not maybe approval right away. This is this is transformation project of an old warehouse from 1899 with onfills and infills and total re-fundamentation of the whole cellar floor. This is actually in the detail phase now. The building site is starting up over the summer. So that's one of the main projects that the office is working on these days. But yeah, why Spasio? Why do we use Spasio? I mean, we are always looking for tools to make our workflow more efficient, especially in the early phases where the expectations from the client are high and the budgets are low. So we have tried, as I guess many of you guys have done as well, tried many different solutions like SpaceMaker now turned Forma, Creo turned Schema, Delve by Sidelabs, Finch, etc. There's a lot of tools out there. But when we came over to Spasio, we were very intrigued right away. And that's probably from an architectural point of view that it was very graphically pleasing to look at just to begin with, which is a very good starting point for people working with design. And then there is this ease of use. There's a lot of push, pulling, splitting, modification of volumes that are super intuitive and easy. Yes, you can generate stuff, but you can also go in and actually do the work yourself if you have a clear plan of what to do. So Spasio is made by architects for architects and puts the architect in the driver's seat, which is a very important philosophy for us. You also get total control of the area metrics in a project, which is always important in an early phase, just to know, are you heading in the right direction? Are you meeting the client's needs and stuff like that? And also there's quite an exciting roadmap for the tools that are going to put in the platform, analyzing tools, simulation tools. There are a few there today, but it's not complete, which is why I'm going to show you an example from a project we recently did where we actually leaned on Spasio as one of the tools that we used the most. But since not all the simulations are in place, we also had to use other software like Forma. This is a site where noise is a very key factor, both from a highway and train tracks nearby is affecting the site. So we had to make a master plan for this area that could respond to both. So this was the idea about how the process should look. Pretty straightforward, starting with hand sketches and then work our way through different software until we end up with a illustration. Truth was a bit more complicated, as it always is. Nothing goes as planned. There's always iterations that happens at a point in time which you hadn't considered. And designing is an ongoing process. So it's a lot of back and forth. Luckily, there are two important tools in this diagram that handles a lot of interoperability, and that's Spasio and Rhino, which sort of were the key information bearers in the project. This started out with very crude hand sketches. I really had to dig deep in the trash bucket to find anything that was from that project. But just to lay out site boundaries, some possible configurations of the building mass, which then were put into Spasio, the site boundaries, and then generated a lot of different options on top of that. The client changed the brief midway, so the site changed. So we did a reconfiguration of the project then in Forma, based on what we learned on the previous analyzing results. Qualified the results with especially then the noise analyzing, and then took it back into Spasio, just to give the buildings a bit more color on this stage. I mean, it is master planning competition. It's not about the architecture and the finished building, but we were able to then work with offsets, different heights, how to use the roofs, make the buildings look a bit different by tweaking the apertures of the windows, and stuff like that. We then used Spasio as a base for storytelling towards the client, based on a diagramming situation where this one represents the connectivity of the green spaces and also then the pedestrian connections, how it connects to the river structure nearby and a green corridor along the railway. Then we had a diagram showing how the access points are, where are the cores of the building located towards the courtyards, how you access the buildings. These were all a bit post-processed in Photoshop and Illustrator, of course. And then a discussion about how you use the rooftop for energy production, recreation, and just general variation. We also used the model to talk about phasing, which areas should you build first, in what order, or what's a possible phasing scenario. Before we went back to hand sketches. This is just a zoom in of a bigger area, so it looks maybe a bit simple and crude here, but as a bigger area that turned out to be a very good way of telling the story of the projects again. But that's also based on the Spasio model. We of course also did other types of illustrations, but they're not really important here. We also took the Spasio model through a simple material editing job in Rhino into Archeo and brought it to the meeting and had the client as part of a VR session, which also is great tool to talk about dimensions, heights, squares, spaces, and just general how you perceive a project from ground level, because it's, renders say one thing. And
so those images are from the VR experience of the client?
Yeah. So you can be multiple persons in there at the same time, and you can look and talk and point. And it's actually a quite funny tool. Or it's very funny. We had it was sort of an experience for us to actually use Spasio as the main tool in the project. And what we learned during that process was that not only is the development of the tool very rapid. I mean, we had new tools and features coming out almost weekly. If we had a problem, we could pick up the phone or a Slack message and talk to one of the developers, and they would either actually sit down and do a program what we needed, or they could inform us, that update is coming tomorrow, so just hang tight. So responsive and quick fixes was great. We had a super good dialogue with many in the team during the process. And throughout the competition phase, there was a lot of key elements that were being introduced into Spasio. We got the defined 0 point, which is a huge pain point when you're working with interoperability, when you don't have control of where is the project located. So just being able to use that on different platforms was a really great way of securing the workflow and be able to handle all the back and forth. The day you did upgrade to the graphics engine, so we were able to handle bigger terrains, because this is a very long and narrow terrain, and we had our own control lines. We generated a much more complex terrain than what we got from the map box. It was super heavy and it slowed everything down, but overnight it turned smooth and simple again. And then there came the park tool, which it sounds simple, but it's an amazing tool just to be able to illustrate, of course, parks with trees, green areas, but you can use it to make or show urban spaces, waterways. This was a site that both contained a river and was close to the water, so just being able to, show that it's actually water and not just a white surface. It gives a lot into the communication of the project. And then you can use, while we wait for the road tool, which is now introduced, but not at the time, you can use it as a road hack as well and create roads with it. And an example of things that got broken during the process but fixed immediately were like, if you put on different facade aperture sizes on a level based or story based, they reverted back to the default setting when you went out of the project. Of course, that would be very frustrating when you go in and out of the project all the time. But that was fixed overnight so that it stuck. It really helped at a stressful deadline situation. So that felt like a really good process where our needs and concerns were taken care of during the competition. And right now we are working with Spasio on something that I think is really, really interesting, to take Spasio to the next level with how you communicate the project, because it's very nice looking now. But what you do want is to start hinting at architecture and different architectural expressions of different buildings. So we're working with the facade systems, or they are working with the facade systems, and we are hopefully testing it out and commenting on it and how it should work, so that you will have bigger control of what kind of architecture you're actually hinting at on a volume level. And then, as Andrea was mentioning earlier, we're also working with how we can improve the graphics to be a very good diagramming tool as well. We use that a lot in our competitions and our communications, just how to tell the story piece by piece by stacking together a lot of images, and then being able to control more of what you see and make sure that it has a very pure and graphical visualization is important for us. So that's something we're really looking forward to diving into in the time to come.
Thank you so much, Francis, for sharing your experience with Spasio, with the audience. I'm going to be a little bit mean to you because we didn't plan on doing any questions, but I'm going to ask you a couple of questions anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
If possible, could you point out at least like how you feel, how you see Spasio, knowing Spasio very well, working with us now for a few years, like today, could you point out or emphasize like one specific thing you feel Spasio enables you to do that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do in different software, or that it enables you to do it in a way that's significantly faster, easier than you would see somewhere else?
Yeah, I can mention one thing. I actually forgot to mention one other thing, and that was we actually met Spasio when you were called Data Trees back in 2021. It's the first time we had a small glimpse of what was coming, and we've sort of been very curious ever since. So that's one of the reasons why we joined the alpha testers and beta testers as soon as we could. But I think your tool does a lot of similar stuff that many others do. It scores very high on simplicity, and it scores very high on visualization. Take, I hope no Autodesk people are here. Forma, for instance, it looks like crap, but it's very efficient. But here you get the joy of actually designing and working with, especially like we do master planning, with something that actually inspires you to keep working on it. And that, and of course, total control of the error metrics, which, I mean, most of these software do, but it's a super important part of that part of the phase. Just, are you meeting the requirements of the brief or not, in a very simple way. So I think usability and how it looks and feels is one of the key points.
Awesome. That's great. And again, what I heard now from your presentation here is that the cooperation you've personally had with the development team at Spasio has been crucial, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've been lucky so that people who were actually, I reached out and I got contact and I never let go. Because when I do face a problem with new technology and projects, I really have the urge to get it fixed, or I have to drop it because, there were some elements there that were almost deal breakers for us to use it in that phase. And when we fixed overnight, then of course we could continue. As I said, we're looking for efficient, streamlined workflows. So, and yeah, you guys delivered above and beyond on that.
That's great to hear, and I think that's something that's obviously when you are, perhaps just a consumer of software and these type of platforms, you kind of forget that it's people behind it developing this, and it is being developed in close relation with the people actually using it, and that is really something that we here at Team Spasio value and emphasize, is this very strong connection and collaboration with our users, and that is something that we invite everyone to partake in. Thank you so much, Francis and Oslo Works. As announced, we have 2 guests for today's webinar, and the next one is another, again, friend of ours, but slightly different. I would say we're all in the AEC sphere here, but they have a slightly different approach. They are not an architectural company, but they work in the field. And they are none other than Vinci Tech. And we are going to let Dr. Gernot Strube tell us about how they've been using Spasio in their some of their projects. But first, a little bit of introduction to the company. Are you with us, Gernot?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Let me see if I can make this work. But thank you, first of all, for the invitation to join you guys for this webinar. As you said, maybe just a few words of introduction. I really come from a long career in consulting, and that's why we have a slightly different approach. We're not a architecture firm, but we are indeed a consulting firm that does architecture as well. The objective from our perspective is to really help transform the industry, to help deliver more and better housing faster and cheaper. That is our mission, if you want, and what we're doing is really work around that. Our primary customers are investors and the project developers, where we provide counseling services. But to be frank, we really help them with their transformation by going into lighthouse projects. So we are working on real projects. We're not trying to help them with funny slides and stuff, but really delivering projects and create the impact, because I think that's what it's all about, to show how it's being done differently. Let me actually go to the next slide here. And there's two core elements to what we provide. One is actually the whole planning process. It's AI-supported digital planning process. But as important is we plan so that actual existing serial construction systems or modular construction systems that are available in the market can be applied to the projects. This is one of the key elements to really make sure we can deliver housing faster and cheaper and a better quality in the end. So it's not only about the planning, but it's also very much about a productized delivery, if you want. One thing that is important, there are good solutions, both on the technology side as well as on the building system sides in the market. So our objective is not to create another piece of software in this space. It is also not to build our own building system and own a factory to deliver from that factory, but it's really making sure for each project we apply a very stringent workflow. I'll get to that. But then also be able to deliver it with an existing building system. Only if you use a building system that is mature, that is consistent in itself, you will be able to really get all the benefits. The objective in the end is all for the inhabitants and the project developers. In the end, it's creating higher space efficiency, better quality of the living spaces, get to the end faster, which save a lot of finance costs, especially since interest rates have gone up, and deliver lower costs, but also at a much higher, earlier point, we have a better price consistency, meaning that we will get a fixed price often before there's even a building permission in place. And overall, we optimize for the best financial results by having a lot more data available than we had in the past. Now, the core for us, particularly from the tech side, is to create a real workflow. We've obviously faced a bit of similar topic as Oslo Works has done, that first of all, there are a lot of solutions. We have tested about 45 solutions across the entire workflow. Not 45 competitors to Spasio, but 45 solutions across the entire workflow to say which ones are good. But we also tested for consistency, for quality, and for ease of use, especially in a workflow with a data handover, etc. And then we've built an integrated workflow that has both AI generative elements in it, it has AI-based analytics elements in it, and it has modeling. So we also use, obviously, 3D models, both Revit and ArchiCAD, because in the end, we do want to hand over a digital twin at the end of the planning, but also then at the end of the construction process to whoever owns the building, because we feel we want to think along the complete life cycle of the building. What's important here is that the analytics tools will give us much higher quality of the results, especially around building and living quality, but also on environmental performance, which is becoming more and more important. The AI support, particularly the generative part, enables us to create a lot more options faster. There is not a single piece of software in the market that you can use across the entire workflow and that does everything. We don't expect that to ever be the case. But we want to use the best software in the workflows, and Spasio is a core element for us in that. One thing that's also important, and this is also something that we feel as a consultant is critical, we do correlate at each phase with continuous tracking of the project financials. As I said, we will get certainty much earlier, but that also means that we always not only say, what does the building look differently, but immediately translate that into what does that mean for the business case of the project. And this is something that our customers very much appreciate, because it is always tied to the bottom line, which is what they're measured against. Now, when we get to achieving impact, as I said, Spasio is a core integral part of our workflows. What we mainly do is, obviously, we use it in the early part, but then also we do what we call better building analysis. It's a bit of a term that has kind of established itself within Vinci Tech, because we look at creating buildings that are actually better for the people living there. Not only better space utilization, but also better in terms of daylight use, in terms of sunlight use, in terms of wind. And I mean, well, I'll let this thing run. This is a daylight analysis we've done on this is a senior home, senior people home. And you see we've done some looking at where are the dark spots, where do we need to allocate rooms, what happens if we change the shape of the building by, taking a part out that you will see here. What I think is important is that we will be able to deliver quantified data on each building. And obviously, this becomes even more difficult and more important when you come across whole ensembles or quarters that you're developing. But what really excites our customers on the development side is that we actually now give them the data that they can go up to the customers and say, not only, well, in our buildings, you get more sunlight than in other buildings, but they quantify how much sunlight you actually get over the day, how much better that is than the average of their own apartments, which they can also use the tools for, but also as we get more data across the industry about other apartments. And you see, this is a totally illustrative list here that we've discussed with them to say that this is what we eventually want to get to say that, look, you have lower wind speeds, meaning that more wind comfort, as in the end, we want to phrase it positively. We have more privacy. You can also look at privacy views very intricately, and particularly when you're in cities, that is a very important criteria. So you can read all the criteria that we actually can quantify here. The reason why we work with Spasio is, the quality of the outputs, and I tell you, that is not a given all the tools we have tested. And my colleague Zia Chen is on this call as well, who has really tested a lot of these solutions. There's high data fidelity, meaning that you can really be sure that the data is used in the right way and what comes up makes sense. What's great is it's fairly flexible in terms of data transfer to our models, our modeling solutions, but also then with other softwares that we use for different parts of the process. And it has appealing graphics, and it's fairly easy to use. So I think this is one of the reasons why we really are very happy to continue with Spasio as one of our core technology pieces in our process overall. We are very happy that we also will have a chance to have a joint webinar with Spasio coming up on 18th of June. And obviously, you're all welcome to join this webinar as well. And I want to thank Spasio for the collaboration and the opportunity to speak here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gernot. That was great. I'm going to actually throw you the same curveball as I did Francis here, and I like to kind of condense everything down to maybe like a singular point whenever possible. What would you say, if it is possible, to kind of, is there like one specific thing you could say that really stands out where you feel like Spasio helps what supports what Vinci Tech is trying to achieve and the value you're providing to the people that hire you?
Yeah, look, I explained right now, I think it's very much about really being able to, first of all, develop better buildings by using Spasio. I mean, obviously, you don't just run the analysis and then have the number. But what you do is you actively use that number to say, how can I redesign? How can I reconfigure the building? The data actually becomes better, the performance data. So I think that is a key use today already, and obviously as your functionality. And the nice thing is also that we're in close collaboration about your roadmap. We kind of develop things together, not only on what the functionality needs to be, but also on how we can create the workflow to more efficiency? What kind of data input-output functions do we need to create more efficiency and consistency across the workflow? I think one thing that is very important to us, and I have to say that Sue, who's on the call, she is much deeper into it. I think she has spent much more time with Spasio, so maybe we can also pass her the ball for some real deep insights. I think what's important for us is the possibility to also eventually go in the direction of, let me say, floor plans, because in the end, it does make a difference whether you have a balcony in front of a living room or whether it's in front of a bedroom, which you probably don't try to do, is maybe a bad example, but then you have a recess or something. Those things make a big difference. And then if you can basically model all this together with the floor plans, I think they will give us another level of quality, especially in providing all the data that I showed on one of the slides, which, you know, is incredible. And I am quite convinced from an industry that once developers are able to give this kind of data, they will put everybody under pressure to at least compete against that, meaning that people will have to do the same. And I think this is what's really needed, because some of the designs we have come across that have been there when we try to make projects viable that were not viable. I also say that the building performance, when we ran Spacio across it, it was disappointing, let me put it this way. And I think this, this holistic functionality about quality of the building and really making it detailed and interactive, I think this is what we need.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to running our joint webinar here in, I guess that's 11 days away.
Yes.
And we're going to take a deep dive there together with Zia and Sarah.
Exactly.
Into how Vinci Tech has been using Spasio specifically on some real world projects. Thank you so much, Gernot. And I will take back control now of the presentation. The next and final segment of today's webinar is giving everyone here a bit of a sneak peek about what we are working on, in the kind of backstage, in the back room of Spasio, deep in the dark dungeons of our development team. I want to invite back to the stage again, Mr. André Argy, to share what's next.
Yeah, we'll wrap up, as you said, with some insights of which direction the platform is heading. Some features which are just around the corner, some are further ahead, but just to give you an indication of what you can expect from the future development and so on. So it's a good bag of some up-and-coming stuff. As we saw earlier, directly pointed out by some users, there was the need to leave the platform to do noise analysis. That's not going to hopefully be the case further on, as we're actively developing the noise as well as the internal daylight analysis in terms of daylight factor. So those will both be available as the same structure as the existing analysis, where you have the instant feedback and results. Especially with the internal daylight, that it goes hand in hand with what we just mentioned in terms of the floor plan aspects of the platform, which we also have some other new workflows which are covering. So we're also working on landscape planning. That means that you'll have both in terms of the graphical aspect of Spasio, but also laying a foundation to do minimum outdoor area requirements, green surface index, and as well for stormwater analysis, where we will have better control of how the plot utilization is made, and also where we have green areas and hard surfaces and so on. So that will take the whole visual aspect as well as the whole feasibility of projects to the next level. Very interesting tool which is coming is what we call the instance buildings tool, probably mostly used for row houses or single family housing or detached housing. Basic concept is you work and you distribute models, instance building along a polyline, and you're able to manipulate and control where you want gaps, how the shape of what type of modular building you want. So in this case, as you see, when you change one building, the whole, like the rest of the scattered buildings actually update. So here you can use your own presets and make reuse buildings scattered across your project. And it will offer a completely new way of working in Spasio, as well as like connecting this to streets. So let's say you draw a street and you say, I want this type of row house on this side and another building type on the other side. So we're very we're very much looking forward into introducing this to the platform. Another big step for Spasio is the whole aspect of manufacturability or the actually constructability in projects, where we're heading in the modular aspect. So this ties back to what we heard from Vinci Tech just recently, like the foundation, the core foundation of building design and architecture comes mostly from the floor plan side to know, is this building going to be constructible or not? So the concept here is that you will make use of an existing floor plan, existing library of floor plans, which you can use as your building blocks. So both in terms of volume elements or plan elements and so on, and use these to be scattered as your or use them as your building blocks for the buildings. So this brings a whole other aspect of accuracy and detailing to Spasio, where you know that, okay, every single building that we actually get out is, we can produce it, we know how much it will cost, because you have full control of the whole quantitative takeoff and so on. So that's a big next step for the platform coming. And in terms of connectivity in buildings and the whole data tree structure that we haven't really talked about today, but that's underlying in Spasio. You will be able to, for example, define this particular balcony type. We want it to be connected to every 2-bedroom apartment, and we want it to be facing towards the west or south of building, or it should be connected to the living room, for example. Those type of connections, or you making use of different core types and so on, will also be a possibility later on. Together with that, a big update in terms of the new optimized space engine, where most of the updates come to the user interface and the whole graphical representation on it, where you have better overview of how's the distribution of different units or spaces across the project. You'll be able to define breakpoints, and breakpoints, that means you can define, for example, for a particular site, a plot, or a building, let's say here I want a specific unit mix, and I want it only to be these particular units that are used in here. So you will be able to more fine-tune how you want to optimize the different parts of your project, and also having better control of how many unique units do you have, what's the, again, tying back to manufacturability, making it economically viable, that we know that we have these 5 different unit types that we're scattered and reproduced across the project. Final aspect, we showcased some parts of the generative tool in the earlier on. We are taking it a couple of steps further. So you will be able to, for example, define targets or thresholds of what type of plot utilization you want to achieve. Is there any specific GFA, any specific unit mix? Being able to define like regulated zoning. So let's say an area where you're not allowed to build buildings, you can exclude that from the whole generative part. Being able to say that in this part of the plot, we only want like every ground story to have commercial spaces, and being able to work with attractor points to define, I want to go high here to have an emphasis, or like a high rise in this end of the site and so on. So a couple of more enhancements to the whole generative engine of how you're able to control that and achieving the results that you want. And yeah, so some fine goodies to expect, and I think we wrap up at this point.